Hello and welcome to this episode of the Growthology podcast. I am here with my longtime friend. We've known each other for over a decade, and I'm pretty sure he still calls me a friend, which means he's very long-suffering. So, Michael Brenner, welcome to Growthology. Glad to have you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So, I think you and I last saw each other at Marketing Profs in October. We were talking before we started here the recording that it was a brief interaction, but I've got to ask you, maybe this is still a sore subject. I don't know. What the heck happened to your Eagles this year?
Well, you didn't warn me that you were going to take me down this dark path. The thing is, they were never as good as their record indicated, really, is what it was. And if you really watch the games like a fan, like I am, you saw that really early on. They never really dominated anybody like they did the year before, where they, I think, should have won, and could have won the Super Bowl, except for a ridiculous holding call in the final minutes of the fourth quarter. So, yeah, they were just not really a great team to begin with, and their record just, they got lucky in a couple of big wins, and I think their weaknesses showed through. So that's kind of what happened there.
Yeah, sorry to pick at that wound. I'm a Broncos fan, so at least you had a team that
That's true.
you could celebrate. And I don't know when we're going to be good again, but I think
Yeah.
it's a long time. So all I'm right now is I'm focused on baseball. I'm a Yankee fan there. I know you, New York, Colorado. Long story, not for the podcast, but fingers crossed. And good luck to your Phillies.
Yeah, thanks.
So, hey, so before we get into everything B2B, would love to just understand, if you weren't in B2B, which is how you and I have come to know each other over the years, what would you be doing?
It's like there was a scene in Forrest Gump, where he's sort of like, I think he makes it big with Apple stock and he doesn't even know what he has. And he becomes a, multi-millionaire, billionaire, and he decides to cut lawns for his high school football field. That's what I'd be doing. I'd be doing, landscaping, lawn care, something where I don't have to deal with people. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's fun. It's funny. I started my career in sales for a B2C company, Nielsen. We were selling, information to CPG companies about, what consumers were buying in stores. And it was always funny when I went to leave there, people were like, "Oh, you're B2B." And that, so we don't want you here at our CPG company. And then the B2C companies are like, "Well, you're B2B. We don't want you in our B2C companies." I have always, and I know we've talked about this over drinks in the past, I have always believed that the line isn't as stark as some people think. That I think B2B could learn quite a bit from the consumer world. I think B2C isn't as exciting and sexy as people think it is. And I think B2B is much more interesting, to be honest. It's 65% of the US economy. So, it certainly is bigger than most people realize. So, I think the where the two worlds come together in B2B to C, I think is really interesting. That's why we both worked at tech companies, because we're powering companies that power companies that reach consumers, right? So I think ultimately we're all working for the mighty consumer dollar, that flows through the economy at some point. But yeah, honestly, I wouldn't, I don't regret staying in B2B.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't either. I did a little bit of a detour when I did some coaching, but I still had some B2B clients that I was consulting with. Not a lot of people understood that, and it didn't matter if I, promoted that or not. However, when you mentioned the landscaping thing, I've actually considered that twice over my life. I love being outside,
Yeah.
love being outdoors. I live in a super small town, and honestly, it's amazing to me that, and when I say small, under 1,000 people, the number of realtors we have in this town, the number of pizza places we have in this town, and then the number of lawn care landscape companies. I think those three predominantly make up the economy in terms of jobs, but it's something that I've really thought of. If I wasn't doing this, maybe just getting outside, cutting some grass, riding a tractor, and getting the farmer's tan wouldn't be that bad of a gig.
It wouldn't be too bad at all. Someday, maybe.
Well, I've got to, tie into pull a Forrest Gump and unwittingly tie into a rocket stock, and we'll see.
Exactly.
So you mentioned Nielsen, you mentioned your work at B2B, B2C, B2B2C. I think most people know you in terms of your work around content, and you've done some great work really helping clients get more from their content, think through their content, rather than just be these content factories, which, produce word salad on paper. From your perspective and the work you're doing with your clients, what is the state of B2B content today?
Gosh, It's a timely question. I don't know when you're going to launch this podcast, but we've got a State of the Union, I think, coming here tonight. But it's confused, it's scared, it's completely unsure of what's going on. I know we'll probably get to AI as one of your questions next, but I think when I look back to how I got into content, it was never a conscious choice. It was, as a sales guy, I was unhappy with the content I was getting from marketing, so I went into marketing. It was a content-driven decision. When I got into marketing, I didn't want to do advertising. I didn't want to do branding. I didn't want to decide what color our logo should be because I didn't think that was going to, drive growth, which is obviously your focus. I started focusing on content because it seemed like the cheapest and most effective way to get leads. People are searching for answers. Let's answer the questions that they have. That's about content. So from one perspective, I think the content marketing industry, the content industry in B2B is grappling with this big question, this sort of eschatological question, what is content and what is the state of it? And everybody's scared. It's still just going to be about the companies that are able to earn trust by delivering the best answers to the questions they ask you answer from our old friend. It's still about creating content that maps to the buyer journey, that hits each stage, and the earlier the better. The more educational, the better. I'm still amazed, and most of the clients that we get today still are companies that are relatively larger than I would think, that have no content on their website. So there's still a large group of companies out there in B2B that haven't focused on delivering content in their digital channels, their sales channels, their go-to-market channels in general, which is something we all figured out, I think, in the large enterprise space that we've worked in the technology space, 10, 15, years ago. So there's still a lot of people that need the basics, I think is kind of my first point. My second point is for those that are maybe more mature and they're thinking about distribution and AI and technology and operational concerns within a large organization. Those issues are always going to be there. And I think there is some technology that's helping to solve it. But, I think in the end, it still comes down to strategy, which is, where we've started and where I'd like to continue to focus is just, if you don't have a strategy, AI is not a strategy. Like we used to say, social media is not a strategy. Well, AI is the new thing. It's the new shiny object. We still need strategies. To me, those are the 2 points, is we still have folks that don't cover the basics of just, they don't have the mission or the mindset to create effective, helpful content for their buyers in B2B. And for those that have done that and are more mature in that, they're still focused on, technology and do we have the right people and what budgets, and they don't have a strategy in place. And so mindset and strategy, I think, are the two gaps that I see. And then, we'll get to AI. I mean, it's something that we're going to need to talk about as part of the state of B2B content.
Yeah, it's interesting, and we will get to AI because I'm very curious. You and I have not talked about this. I'm really curious to your perspective. Out this morning, I had someone tell me last week when I was speaking at a marketing gathering of, you seem skeptical of AI. I'm like, I'm not skeptical of AI. I'm skeptical about how it's being applied, but we'll put a pin in that and come back to it. You talked about strategy. I am always amazed, and this question in the Content Marketing Institute research has always blown my mind in terms of the answers. They talk about, do you have a marketing strategy? And typically there's anywhere from 35 to, I think at 1 year, it was over 50% who said, we have a strategy, but it's not documented. And my response to that is, well, if I don't need to have documentation, then I have a PhD from Harvard. I mean, am I wrong? And feel free to tell me I'm wrong, but especially, I mean, if you're a solopreneur, great. You don't need a documented content strategy. But if you're a company of any size, am I wrong to think that if it's not documented, it doesn't exist? Why do companies need to move to say, document the strategy? And then I've got a follow-up question after that.
Yeah, no, you haven't seen me speak in a while because you've seen me, you've seen it, and you wouldn't learn anything from me at this point. But it's like the second or third slide in every presentation I give, it's exactly that research, and it's basically, there's 2 pie charts, and the difference between the successful and the not successful is not whether they have the strategy. Both successful and unsuccessful content marketers have a strategy, about 50% or more. The big difference is it's between 10% of the unsuccessful and 50% of the successful have documented it. So you're absolutely right. So successful content marketers are 5 times more likely to have it documented. The reason for that, you and I both worked at big companies, is because if it's written down, you have to share it, and if you have to share it, people are going to challenge it, and at some point have to accept it. And that's really what it comes down to is gaining the buy-in that's needed for the strategy to be implemented effectively. If it's not documented, it doesn't exist. It's I'm a rocket scientist. If we don't have to write it down, it's the same thing. So it's really about getting buy-in across the organization. About where we're driving the bus. That's really what good strategy is. It's just a kind of agreement on where we're going and some agreement on how we're going to get there, but not, all those details filled in. And so that's why documenting it, I think, is so important.
Well, thank you for that. And I think it can shift too, right? Nobody has a crystal ball 12, 18, 24 months down the road, but that strategy should be a living, breathing document that the entire organization can rally around. My follow-up question is, when I hear people say, well, we do content marketing, one of my first responses is content for what? And so I'd love for you to kind of unpack. You talked about content for demand gen or in that buying process, but we know there's brand content, there's post purchase, what I call customer marketing or value expansion content. How have you seen that differ? Is it all thematic across the board so you drive that consistent experience? And are there organizations who are taking that holistic journey approach, understanding that the initial buying process is pretty small comparative to the entire journey? Are there companies that are doing it well and taking that approach to say, hey, there are some nuances based on the stage of the customer?
So you're kind of leaning into a really complicated topic. And it's the way I try to describe it is the difference between content marketing strategy and content strategy. Our friend Robert Rose does a great job speaking to large companies about trying to wrestle the monster of content strategy, because everything is content. In an organization, everything is content. Customer success content, partner enablement content, sales enablement content, marketing content, sales content, everything is content, HR content, employer branding. It's almost an unsolvable beast. It's almost too big. And so in content marketing strategy, we try to nail it down to just really marketing content that's intended to drive leads for sales. And I even go even a little more tighter to say, you've got different folks that are doing a good job at demand gen, things that you're really good at, demand gen, sales enablement, partner enablement, those kinds of things, product marketing. Gosh, it's a whole nother conversation. I try to focus in on the biggest gap. And for me, the biggest gap in almost every company is the earliest stages of the buyer journey content. So it's content marketing for leads, but really specifically the gap in early stage content. And that's your basic educational blog type stuff. Which somehow in 2024 is still a gap for even large companies. So, that's, I think, the way that I try to recommend people try to slice that onion if you can. The big content strategy questions require people, process, technology, require a lot of people in the room, require senior buy-in to, what you're trying to accomplish, lots of budget. Are there large companies doing it? Are there companies doing it well? I really don't think so. I think it's like, it's like pizza. My family can't agree on one place that we all love for pizza. Some places 3 of us like out of 6, and some places 4 of us like out of 6, and some place 1 of us like out of 6. But none of the 6 of us love one place. And it's the same thing with who's doing content strategy well. Like, it depends on who you ask. You might get 3 out of 6 or 4 out of 6 or 1 out of 6, but no one's 6 out of 6. And that's just kind of the way it is.
Yeah, I'll have to give some thought on the content marketing strategy. And I understand why, with what you do, why you focus on where's that gap. But I do think there's more towards content marketing than just driving leads. I look at 90% of customer lifetime value is realized after that initial sale. Well, customers don't want to constantly be bombarded by a salesperson, but there's content that can be created to nurture that relationship further, especially that adoption and onboarding stage, which are so critical. So probably don't have time to unpack all of that, but I'm going to give that thought and maybe come back to you, maybe bring you back on and have another discussion around that.
Yeah, I have a slide. It's kind of complicated. It's basically a triangle, a pyramid, and an upside down pyramid. that represent the content marketing funnel and the product marketing funnel. And for me, it's a way in its early, middle, and late stages. And there's sort of like the brand forward focus is why they're one is up right side up and one is upside down, because of the number of people that each of those funnels, if you will, are targeting. But it absolutely goes through the full customer life cycle. And that's essentially what I call that slide a customer strategy visualized. I'll send that to you. Maybe you can include it in the show notes or something. But again, it's kind of complicated, but I think it's like it's the ideal state that no one's really achieved, but we should all be working towards. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, I'd love to take that and we'll put it in the show notes. You mentioned pizza, and then I mentioned speaking. This is how my ADD brain works. Speaking at the conference last week, they did a mixer, and one of the hot topics was pineapple on pizza. So we're going to take a quick diversion. What's your take on that?
It's like sure. I mean, it's not for me, but I'm not going to judge people. I'm not going to come down hard and say it's a sin. It's against the law. A free country, man. You want pizza? You want pineapple on your pizza? Go for it.
See, I think it's disgusting. I mean, if that's what you want, it was interesting.
Yeah.
One of the people in the crowd got up and said, "I just don't trust people who put fruit on pizza." I was like, wow, that's maybe taking it to a different extreme, but okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
So I diverted, but yeah, I don't know. Well, I just don't like pineapple in general. So you put it on pizza, which is a food that I love.
Yeah.
It's a bridge too far.
Yeah, I mean, on my list of things I hate, it's not really on the top 10, but I don't prefer it for sure. I would never order it. But
Yeah.
sure, I can see why some people would hate it. That's fine.
All right. Well, what we calling for your family to kind of get a consensus? It's like a buying group, right? When it comes to
Oh,
so.
yeah, exactly. Let's pick a vendor.
Right. You mentioned AI. Man, oh man, it's you can't read anything. And what I have seen is you get an email or a LinkedIn proposition and you're like, okay, this was AI created. It's, I don't know, from your perspective, helping or hurting content and what can be done to really harness the power that it can provide.
Yeah. So I've been testing a few different messages around this in my speeches in the last few months. A couple of the points I like to make are AI can't create demand.
Mm.
AI can't drive growth. It's a tool like marketing automation was 20 years ago, right? Cool, we have this new tool that we can use and it's going to change the world. All of a sudden, we're going to go from we don't have enough leads, so we have too many leads and sales is going to love us. Well, it's just a tool, right? So we had to fix a lot of other things. We needed other, sort of mindsets, an inbound mindset, a content mindset. It drove positive change in the end, but in the end, it was just a tool and a relatively simple one, right? Like the early days of marketing automation it was just automated email. Like, so the early days of AI is, hey, ChatGPT, write me an article. And it's not one that I would post on my website. So, that's, I think, important to remember. It is not going to solve all of our problems. Is it something we should all pay attention to? Absolutely. Like every, exciting technology, we should certainly pay attention to it. We're testing it. We're using it, in ways that we think can be helpful. But at the same time, I caution people to say, I just worry that this could be the link building, the spammy link building of the 20, back in 2010, every company's like, we need to build links, and there's these link farms that we could get into, and they can drive all kinds of links to our website, and SEO is going to be great, and all these people are, we're going to rank number one for everything, and then everybody did it, and the internet became this, hodgepodge of spammy websites, and then Google shut it down, and now we look back and we laugh and we scoff at, what were we thinking? I am afraid that AI is going to, in some ways become like that. And I'll give you just one quick example. There's all this research out there that shows that when AI, which has been trained on human generated content, right? They sucked all the human generated content from the web, they trained the AI and all the language models, and it started spitting out stuff that made sense. Well, now the internet is filled with, some people say 40, some people say 60% of content created by AI. And all of these research studies, there's not a single one that didn't come to the conclusion that when AI starts to train itself on AI generated content, it starts to create gibberish around the third or the fourth cycle. So we're in cycle one. We're not 100% of the web is generated, content by AI. If we get there, God save us all. But when AI starts to learn on itself, it's going to start creating gibberish. So keep that in mind if you want to start using AI to generate content for your website. Can it be helpful in generating automated emails? Sure. Is it good for webinar descriptions? It's awesome for that. I use it for my own speaker session descriptions. For social media, perfect. For long form content, absolutely not. For product descriptions, maybe. For the copy on your product web pages, I don't think so. So like I think it's a tool. We have to be super careful. Some people are gonna overuse it and poison the well in a lot of cases with the web. And if it goes too far, it's going to become completely useless. And so that's what I think we have to, that's kind of my take in a hot minute.
No, I think it's a great take. I've seen it. I hadn't really thought about third, fourth generation of now it's sucking in AI generated content. It was interesting. We were using it for a client and we just, the prompt had, and include quantifiable research to back up these points. That was part of the prompt. What was so interesting, it came back and it said ABCDE research says boom, 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 and they quoted some stat. And then GEHF, right? And it was like, wait a minute, these aren't research companies. You're making this up. So then what we did is we took the research and we took part of the snippet and we put it into Google to say, is there any research out there that even closely resembles this from a certifiable or a legitimate source? There was nothing. And that's when I first, and this was months and months ago, but that's when I first started saying, we've got a problem on our hands, because I know marketers will just do cut paste. And there's the one thing too that I've seen is AI cannot replace being human, which is desperately lacking also in B2B. Are you seeing the same in terms of the lack of humanity?
Yeah. No, I again, one of the lines that I'm testing in my latest speeches is the paradox of AI is that the more technology we use, the more human our buyers are going to expect us to be in the sales process. And we may end up going back to golf and steak dinners. Like I don't think we will. You and I are old enough to remember those days when, our job in B2B marketing was to hang banners at events and get the reservation at the steak place for the sales team. Like we might go back to some form of that high touch, sort of activity, because that's what buyers are going to expect, because they're going to be like, I mean, how many spammy LinkedIn, messages do you get a day, right? So the more and more of that kind of stuff that AI is going to generate, the more human people are going to, are going to expect the B2B process to be. That's the paradox of AI.
Yeah, I would love to go back to steak dinners and golf. I suck at golf, but I enjoy.
Me too. Let's skip the golf and just go to steak.
Yeah, I'd be all right. As a matter of fact, I think we did that one time after you and I both delivered workshops at Props.
Yep.
We were both so brain dead. We were like,
Yeah,
kind of like, do you want to just skip the reception? We'll just go grab a steak dinner. Yeah, I'll do that all day long. I love steak.
yeah, exactly.
So, all right. So you've talked a little bit about strategy with content marketing. So when I hear strategy, I think, the outcome is how are you driving performance? Dive a little bit deeper into how can I define a strategy? So if you have somebody listening who's saying, well, we're one of the 40+% who doesn't have a documented strategy, we know that's step one. But what should that strategy, how does that strategy come together? What's included in that? And I know you can't, like limited time, can't go into terrible detail, but what should be included in that so it improves the performance of content? And then if you can, talk about what are some of those content performance metrics that organizations should be paying attention to?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically the whole book, The Content Formula. And basically what I say in that, and in my workshops, we get to this in the first hour. Marketing can be boiled down to only 4 objectives. And somebody could argue with me on these, but reach, engage, convert, and retain. There's really nothing else. And the reason, again, somebody could argue that there's a fifth or there's only 3, whatever, but we need to reach new people, engage the folks that we're already speaking to who know us, convert those folks into new buyers, new customers, and retain the ones that we have. I can't think of anything else that is as important as those 4 things in marketing. And so your content marketing strategy or your marketing strategy overall needs to identify how you're going to achieve reach, engagement, conversion, and retention. And so for each one of those objectives, there are metrics that you can look at. How many net new people are coming to our website? Is our unaided brand awareness improving if you're an advertising person? So there are very specific, I like sort of how many search terms do we rank for and how much organic search traffic are we getting to our website for the reach metric for content. Engagement is relatively easy and somewhat complicated from the perspective of it's easy to get new people that are less engaged. So we need to get more people that are as engaged as the people we already have. That's a tricky one. But engagement measurement is pretty easy. Time on site, bounce rate, open rates for emails, those kinds of things. Are people actually reading or sharing the content that we create? Conversion is something, I mean, you could talk all day. You do workshops on, or have done workshops on conversion alone. In B2B, we know how to measure conversion, but can you tie content to leads or your content strategy to leads? I think is important. And then retention is my favorite. And it's, it's the easiest way to drive ROI is by just simply improving retention by a small amount. And what's interesting in all the research that I've done, and I learned this at SAP, was early stage buyer content is actually really good at retention. And I'll give you a quick example. We had a piece of content that was how CIOs can become better managers. And what we found at SAP was it was one of our top performing blog posts for driving leads in the HR segment. But what we also found was that on the technology side, it was driving like folks that became customers or were customers that subscribed to our newsletter on that article were actually spending more that had already been existing customers. So we had a retention metric for our blog posts. And what we found was that this How to Become a Better Manager article was really good at essentially gaining subscribers from existing customers who were high spending and long-term or longer-term customers. So we can measure retention, lifetime value, upsells, cross-sells, all those different kinds of things, even from the content. So those are just some quick objectives and measures for each of those, I think, steps of the strategy ladder.
Yeah, I like that. And I like that you put retention in there. I would maybe also would add expansion, because I think you can retain, which is fantastic. But now if I can expand and increase that share of wallet, and obviously the two go hand in hand. Rarely am I going to retain a customer for years and not have them spend more money. But I like how you break that down. And I think it's that kind of simplicity that I think marketers need to embrace. So as you were talking about some of the metrics, I've been one, and I know there's others that talk about stop with the vanity metrics. Now, when I say that, I think there's value in tracking how many people are coming to my site. Am I increasing the engagement on my site? What I'm saying about vanity metrics is your CEO does not care on, did we drive 2,000 more visits this month to the website? They want to know about the conversion stuff and the retention stuff. So what is that balance in terms of, there are some things marketing needs to know on, let's just call that's how the sausage gets made, versus what your CEO and your CFO want to know to what is the outcome of that sausage making process. What do you?
It's the whole reason I wrote the content formula, because my message to marketers was don't ever present vanity metrics to your CEO. Only ever present. It's funny. I tell the story when I used to speak on the book, which is now, 9 years old. I used to talk about how I used to ask CMOs what's the ROI of their marketing, and I was shocked at how many couldn't answer the question. I bet you if I don't know that I've seen this survey, but if you did a survey today of CMOs on the spot, what is the ROI of your marketing? I don't think 80% of them would know the number. They wouldn't be able to give you an answer, or they would sort of like, shuffle around the answer. And so it's ROI. That's it. I completely agree with you. Vanity metrics should never be in a presentation to anyone outside of marketing. I don't even think it should go to the CMO unless he's asking or she's asking. It's ROI. I've been a firm believer as a former sales guy that marketing should drive revenue, should drive results, should drive ROI, and should focus on those metrics when talking to anyone outside of marketing. So, it's a hot button issue for me, and I could spend a whole day talking about it if you want.
Well, I think that's probably one of the reasons why we've been so aligned on so many things. You've talked about your sales background. I have a sales background as well, and I think it's actually made me a better marketer. I've never known a world in marketing, going back when I first started, where you didn't tie marketing back to some sort of revenue or pipeline metric. It was always about the outcome. So if I'm driving more people to my site, that's great. But what does that mean in terms of conversion? If I'm not moving that revenue needle, I'm going to have a really hard time convincing my CEO or CFO not to cut budget or to give me more so I can drive revenue. Leads me to ask you, I mean, you remember the days where it was like every other post, somebody was like, marketers need a seat at the table. I don't think we're seeing that as much because CEOs now, more than 50%, are saying, drive, I want you to be tied to growth. Marketing has to be tied to growth. My question for you is, are we ready for the seat that we've been given?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of us have. Again, I've been fortunate enough to never have to work on marketing programs that didn't have an ability to demonstrate return on
Sure.
investment.
Yeah.
And like events. I mean, events are great ROI producers. I've never actually been in event marketing, but I think if I were forced to come back as not a content marketer, it would probably be as an event marketer because they're great. They're great at driving revenue and pipeline and net new leads and closing existing pipeline. Advertising awareness, there's a lot of CMOs that love those budgets. They love their advertising budget. And I'm not going to sit here and say that advertising doesn't work. There are plenty of companies and lots of agencies that would send me hate mail if I were to say that. And I have said that and gotten the hate mail. But the fact is, it's really difficult to show ROI from certain types of marketing activities. It's a discipline, it's a mindset. And, I always say marketing has a marketing problem because if you ask most people what marketing is, they say it's ads, it's Super Bowl ads. So they talk about, oh, yeah, let's talk about the funny ads that people do and how bad the ads are. That's not marketing. It's not all marketing is. It may be the large portion of a budget, unfortunately, for some companies. Yeah, I mean, I think performance-driven marketing has been a topic of conversation. CEOs have expected marketing to deliver ROI, but like the funny part about CEOs is a lot of them are also the ones that ask us to do more advertising because it strokes their ego. I think the modern CMO, the modern marketing leader, needs to be somebody, and this is why I wrote Mean People Suck. Mean People Suck was all about, it was essentially a marketing parable, if you will. It was that modern marketers need to be able to say, no, I'm not going to go do that thing that you want me to do just because you think it's good for the brand because you watched a Super Bowl ad once and you liked it or didn't like it. Just because you have an opinion doesn't make you a marketer. As a CEO, I respect your opinion, but I'm going to show you why that's not maybe the best investment and you want results. So let me go do my job and deliver those results with the tools that I have in my toolkit. Or, let's test it in a small way before we spend $14 million on putting our logo on the side of a stadium. And I've worked with CEOs and companies that thought that was marketing. We live in a world, I think, that doesn't understand what marketing is. And so it's up to us to show them that's, I think marketing can deliver growth. So it's, you put your big boy pants on, I think if you want that seat, but we need to do the job of showing people what marketing can do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I love the fact that you highlighted my words, not yours, but the word no. You can say no. And if you have the data to back it up, it's hard to argue with the data. I also think one of the biggest downsides, if not the biggest downside of marketing, everybody thinks they can do marketing. And
Yeah.
so it's something where I say, I think this is the best time to be in B2B, but she also has everybody. And it's one of the things what I hate when people say, so what do you do? I'm like, oh, because I know I'm going to say marketer. And then they go, oh yeah, I remember one time, or I had an uncle who, and it's like, okay, yeah. So now I just tell them I'm in an agency, or maybe I'll start telling them I'm a landscaper. I don't know. Yeah.
I'm sure you've experienced this as well in your local community. I say marketer and people are like, oh, I own a pizza shop. How do I get more people to come? I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't do that kind of marketing. Go talk to an advertising agency who will love to take your money and tell you all the ways that you should spend it.
Exactly. By the way, I still have my Mean People Suck t-shirt, and I still wear it. And anytime I wear it out, people are like, awesome shirt. Yeah, thanks. So then I tell them about your book. So
The merchandise was not the viral hit that I hoped it would be, but I'm glad. I think you and your wife both got one, and I'm
yeah,
glad to see that you're still repping the brand. I appreciate it.
absolutely. I wear it every time. Yeah, it's just a great shirt and it sends a great message. So last question for you. It's just a simple true or false. The customer is king. Or I'm sorry.
Oh,
Wait, I'm going to redo that and we can take that. Tracy, take this out in editing. True or false? Content is king.
Yeah, I've always hated the analogy. Distribution is king, and you sort of gave me a hint to the real answer, but the customer is king, and we do, like I said earlier, I gravitated towards content because it works. And content works because it's an answer to a question. It's an education to a gap in knowledge, helping buyers buy. So content is not the end goal. It's really about serving the needs of the buyer at every stage of their journey. And so if that's content or it's a steak dinner, then I think it's irrelevant as long as we're focused on really driving customer results.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I think good content will serve the customer, help them get the answers they want. So, Michael,
Mhm.
thanks for taking the time. Really good to see you again. I'll look forward to our next steak dinner where
Yeah, or pizza. Now I'm hungry for pizza, so maybe we should go have a slice.
I think I still have some leftover from the other night. Thankfully, it's just two of us now, my wife and
There
I.
you go.
We've never had that really division in our marriage, thank God. So it's all
There
good.
you
But
go.
thanks for being on the Growthology podcast. We'll link both your books, and then also if you send me that framework, we'll put that up in the show notes. We'll also put in your LinkedIn profile so people can connect with you and continue to glean your wisdom. So thank you so much for being part of the Growthology podcast.
Thanks for having me.